Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Toldot, which means the history of or the descendants of. And essentially what we're talking about today is the descendants of Isaac. The Torah portion begins, Ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham holit et Yitzchak. These are the descendants of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham gave birth to Isaac. And then, of course, it goes on to talk about not Isaac, but rather the birth of Isaac's two sons, Esau and Jacob. And if anything, this Torah portion tells us the story of Jacob, of his wives, and of his children. But what I would like to focus on today is actually another character that we've met briefly in last week's portion, but we learn much more about in this week's portion, and that's Isaac's wife, Rebekah. We learned in the last portion, towards the end of the portion, when Eliezer brings her back to Isaac for a wife, we learned, first of all, that she was a very generous and caring person. When Eliezer first met her at the well, she was very kind, generous. She offered to give him water and as well to give his camels water to drink, which, if you have any awareness of how much a camel drinks, that is an awful lot of trips to the well that this young girl, Rebekah, did. So this demonstrates, of course, her kindness and her generosity. And later on, when she approaches Isaac and she sees him from a distance, she immediately covers her face, drops down from her camel. So we have here a sense of modesty, a sense of awe of Isaac. She sees in him a man of faith, as she sees in him a righteous man, and she is very eager to be married to this righteous son of Abraham. In this week's portion, we first meet Rebekah in a context of prayer. In the first, we're reading now in chapter 25, verse 21. Isaac is praying because Rebekah is barren and they desperately want children. And we have here a very interesting phrase, Vayeta Yitzchak laHashem lenochach ishto. Isaac prayed to God opposite his wife. Now, the word lenochach means literally opposite. I realize it is translated many times regarding his wife. But in fact, the word literally means opposite, and our sages have interpreted this to mean that actually Isaac stood opposite Rebekah, and while Isaac was praying, so too was Rebekah. In any case, they are both involved in this mutual prayer to God to have children. And indeed, God answers the prayer, and Rebekah becomes pregnant. Shortly after, of course, during her pregnancy, in the next verse, we learn that there's a great deal of struggle going on in her womb, and she's concerned, and she goes to seek God. She goes to find out what the problem is. And we have here, Scripture tells us in verse 23, and God said to her, there are two nations in your womb, two peoples will be separated from your intestines. And how does the verse end? The older will serve the younger. She then has these two children, Esau and Jacob. Esau is indeed the older, and according to this scripture, according to this word that she receives directly from God, Esau is the one who should serve his younger brother, Jacob. Later on, we have the story of the blessings. Isaac realizes he's getting old. He's going to bless his sons. He has every intention of giving Esau the blessing of the eldest. He asks him to prepare him food. Rebekah gets wind of this, of course, and mounts a scheme, which she takes with Jacob. It is her initiative, however, and she asks Jacob to pretend he is Esau, and therefore he deceives Isaac together with Rebekah in order for him to receive the blessing that Isaac originally intended for Esau to have. Now, the question, of course, is, was Rebekah doing the right thing? Was she just coming up with a scheme to favor the son that she indeed favored? Or was she doing what needed to be done? And I think it is clear from Scripture that Rebekah understood that this is what needed to be done, because Rebekah was a prophetess. Now, what is a prophet or a prophetess? This is someone to whom God speaks to directly and who gives very clear messages, and on the basis of those messages, people need to act. We see here at the very beginning of the portion that God spoke directly to Rebekah and said to her, there are 2 nations in your womb, and the older will serve the younger. And what she was essentially doing in enabling Jacob to receive the blessing, she enabled Jacob to receive a blessing from Isaac that involved political power. And it was this political power, this dominion, that she had received this direct message from God, that she understood it was Jacob that should receive this blessing and not Esau. And I think we have confirmation in the text afterwards as well of a further intervention from God. And again, this is consistent with classical Jewish commentaries. In chapter 27, when it becomes clear to Isaac that that there has been a mistake, not a mistake, that he has been deceived, Esau finds out, etc. First of all, we learn in chapter 27, verse 41, Esau detests Jacob because of the blessing, and Esau says in his heart, he says to himself, and the verse goes on to explain that he makes it very clear he wants to kill his brother Jacob as soon as his father passes away. He doesn't want to further cause his father further pain, but he has every intention. But he doesn't tell this to anyone. Scripture tells us very clearly, Esau says in his heart. And yet, just a few verses later, in verse 42, the very next verse, it says, and it was told to Rebekah the words of Esau, her elder son. Now, we don't know who told this to Rebekah, but if you think about it for a moment, if Esau only had this intention in his own heart and told no one, how was it that Rebekah discovered that Esau wanted to kill Jacob? And our sages have interpreted this scripture to say, yet again, that Rebekah is a prophetess, and it is God who spoke to her directly and revealed to her Esau's evil intentions. And therefore she goes ahead and asks Isaac to please bless Jacob and send him to Haran to find a wife. Of course, as soon as Jacob leaves, and we see this in next week's portion, God blesses Jacob himself and makes it clear that indeed he is the heir of Isaac. He is the heir to the blessings that God has selected Abraham and Isaac to receive, and indeed Jacob will receive those same blessings and not Esau. So again, we have divine confirmation. Rebekah, in this week's portion, is a righteous woman. She is a prophetess, and she acts boldly and wisely in order to fulfill those prophecies that she has received directly from God. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat.